Welcome to the show where we expose new perspectives on our ever-evolving world through the lenses of various industries, cultures, and backgrounds. Our guests are disruptors, united by a common goal to bring their purpose to life. Whether they're from the commercial world or third sector, from the global north or the global south, expect an inspirational journey that will transform your perspective on just what is possible. My name is Philippa White, and welcome to TIE Unearthed. What happens when someone deeply committed to democracy, both at home and abroad, steps into the political arena? And what do they learn about power, accountability, and the urgent threats facing our systems today? Hello and welcome to episode 106 of TIE Unearthed. Today I speak with my longtime friend Christina Hartman, a woman who has dedicated her career to protecting and promoting democracy, from working in international development with organizations like Freedom House and the National Democratic Institute to running for U.S. Congress in 2016 and for Pennsylvania Auditor General in 2020. Christina has seen firsthand how systems of power are built, challenged, and then sometimes dismantled. She's raised millions for nonprofits like the Joyful Heart Foundation, led her own political campaigns, and helped shape global human rights efforts. With deep experience and relationships across local, state, national, and international levels, Christina has a proven track record of bringing together American, international, government, civil society, labor, business, and other stakeholders to drive meaningful change. And today, she warns that one of the world's largest democracies is under threat. In this episode, Christina and I explore her fascinating career and what it taught her about leadership and resilience. We dig into her experiences running for office, the rise of authoritarianism, the parallels between the US and Brazil, and the consequences of America stepping back from the global stage. Christina also unpacks why so many voters are feeling disillusioned and why civic engagement is now more critical than ever before. This is a powerful conversation about leadership, accountability, and the future of our institutions. So, let's get into it. Christina, thank you so much for joining me on TIE Unearthed. You are such an old friend, and I just am so honored to have you with all of us. So thanks for joining.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And we go back a while to the beginning of TIE, actually. So
to the beginning of TIE. It is. I mean, I just think of our lunches in New York City, sitting at a canteen or something and just in a booth. I mean, that was probably 2007.
Yeah. I mean, definitely when we met up in London, it was 2007 because that's when I was, or 2008 in London. Yeah. So New York would have been around the same time as well.
Long time ago. So Christina, tell me, where are you? Because I love the fact that I just speak to people all over the world. So where are you sitting right now?
Well, I happen to be sitting in the southwest of England, in a place called Bovey Tracy, which sits on the River Bovey, after which it is named. It's a town near Exeter, the area where my husband is from. So we split our time, I split my time between here and Philadelphia in the US.
Very cool. Next time I'm back in the UK, and if our dates actually align, I'm looking forward to seeing you there, which will be really nice. We haven't managed to make it work yet, but that would be amazing. Christina, I've always been so inspired by you and your work, particularly now at this moment. I couldn't have thought of a better person to speak to. And of course, you got my email reaching out not that long ago, be like, I think we need to have this podcast. But so that our listeners can understand why I was so keen to talk to you, perhaps before we get into all the work stuff and the heavy kind of political stuff, tell us your story.
My story is that I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in a town that was known for building community. And then I went out into the world and I did that, right? So I went to get a degree in international affairs, the very kind of degree that's really needed these case. Although
Right.
some people would like to not admit that. I was lucky enough to be able to work with USAID implementing partners, so it's the Agency for International Development in the United States. I worked for their implementing partners, including Freedom House and the National Democratic Institute, so doing democracy work all over the world. Did that for about not quite 15 years and, decided to focus on domestic issues because I could see what was coming down the pike, that things were not headed in a positive direction. So that was in around 2011, 2012. Got a job doing work as a director of development for an organization that supports survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. And then really still felt like I wasn't making the contribution that I probably could and should, and decided to run for Congress in 2016.
Yeah, right.
In what was then Pennsylvania's 16th district. And since then, I've done a smattering of things, including running for other offices, consulting. So I do business development, support nonprofits in a variety of ways, including strategic planning, and then also did a stint for a startup out in California for a few years to try to make the most of some of the American Rescue Plan dollars that Biden had gotten out to lots of different cities to help increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in the tech sector. Always trying to empower people around the world, whether it's in my own country or elsewhere, to do what they're best at and to help make change.
The UK connection, just to sort of put a personal slant on all of this.
Yeah, my husband is British and we met in Serbia when I was working there, and he was at a political conference, and we've been together for like 20 years now, which is a little crazy. I'm really lucky to have this sort of bi-coastal life, bi-coastal in a very different way to most Americans, but also really glad because having spent a lot of time in Europe when I was in high school, I knew that, I just have a deep connection to like France, and my heritage is European. And so being able to be here in the UK has always been a great thing for me in terms of making that connection, of course, until Brexit, which also links up with our conversation today. And then, so, my husband and I we're people who speak a couple languages. We're people who really are interested in politics. My husband has won a local council race here and is running for another race that's in May. So, we're both just politically active people who believe in government and believe that it can do good for people, and that we want to be a part of that and be a part of making it better, right? So that it really responds, as Secretary Madeleine Albright, or Ambassador Secretary Madeleine Albright used to say, making sure that democracy delivers, right? So the reason that people are so unhappy right now, one of the many reasons, is that democracy has not delivered for them, or at least they don't feel like it has. And so that's part of why we are here. So I'm glad to be married to a person who believes in the same things that I do.
Yeah, right. And I mean, it's fascinating because you both do it on both sides of the ocean. So many different perspectives, which is incredible. So talk to us about your work in politics and also just international development. And obviously that's a loaded question and you can take that wherever you want. But I think it would just be really interesting to get, and you touched on it obviously as you introduced yourself, but perhaps you can help us just understand that context.
My work in international development, again, was for Freedom House and the National Democratic Institute, which are seen as democracy and human rights organizations. Freedom House more on the human rights and civil political liberty side of things, NDI more on the elections and political processes side of things, but still all in the same bucket of democracy and governance. I worked in Central Asia and in Sub-Saharan Africa and a little bit in former Yugoslavia and the Middle East. And so was always working with individuals or nonprofit organizations to provide them with the support that they needed to advocate for their needs to government, right? So helping them to organize or get the money that they needed to hold events and do activities to get the word out about a variety of things. And so in Uzbekistan, that was working with human rights defenders who had many of them personally experienced or their families personally experienced being unjustly imprisoned, for example. Americans are starting to begin to understand what unjust imprisonment is, with a number of the folks that have recently been unjustly imprisoned in the past 2 weeks in the United States, as well as those who have been taken from the United States, Venezuelans who may have been in the United States legally but were deported illegally to El Salvador. So we would have helped cases like that in Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan. In my work in Sub-Saharan Africa, I did work with youth leaders. So looking for the next generation of leaders and talent. In a sense, it's like a bit like recruiting, which is something I do as a consultant, right? Looking for those folks. And I do it in politics as well. So really trying to tap into into who are the real leaders who don't see themselves as leaders. We worked really hard to scour the continent because, as you know, in international development programs, there's often like what I call the usual suspects. So the same people keep cycling through a lot of different programs or exchanges and whatnot. And so this was really about finding different folks. That program eventually became a flagship program under the Obama administration. And then my last program in Africa was Sudan and South Sudan. When Sudan was one country, so I oversaw a $40 million program over 3 years when it went from one country to two countries. And obviously, as we know now, most of the things in Sudan are back to being similar to how they were back in 2006. For example, when, let's call it the North and the South, right? So the northern part of Sudan, where Khartoum is, and the southern part of Sudan were fighting between each other, but then also on the border of Darfur, right, between the Chadian border. And so you had a situation that was on fire back, not quite 20 years ago, but almost. And the situation there is pretty much the same now for a variety of reasons. So that's, I would say, my international development career in a nutshell.
Do you want to just, in a nutshell, just explain your political work? Because I find it really interesting that you also then ran for Congress. So you have this international development understanding in countries and democracies or dictatorships that you might not have experienced in the US. And so you have that experience in other countries, but then you brought a lot of those learnings and ran for Congress. Perhaps just very quickly, just bring that to life so we can understand.
Yeah, sure. So lots of people run for office. And I think most people, maybe not all, but a lot of people definitely come to that. There's like a light bulb moment. Here's what I need to do. I need to run for office. So I think part of it can be attributed to me having run a marathon. Because they say that after you run a marathon, you have an epiphany. That 100% happened to me. So I think that I just was feeling really frustrated with how things were going in the United States. I had felt that way for a long time, right? So I went to George Washington University, which my freshman dorm was 4 blocks from the White House. Everybody that I knew in college as I was growing up in university was, working at the White House or at the Hill or where have you. And it was just so clear to me that while they wanted us to obviously do the grunt work, they didn't necessarily want us to take our suggestions or be a part of the process. And it just felt like it was Band-Aid upon Band-Aid. And you could see even in 1995, what the Republicans were trying to do. And by the way, then I was an independent, right? Like I came out of a place which was staunchly anti-political. My parents were always like, you vote for the best person. Parties are not as important as the person and the job they're going to do and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I came to DC and could just see like what the Republicans were up to. So I aligned myself with the Democratic Party then, but I didn't do anything for the Democrats. In fact, there were many elections when I probably didn't even vote, right? Because in DC, you don't really have a voice. All this to say that in 2012, I could see what was happening around the country. So Planned Parenthood was being attacked for the umpteenth time. I started researching the person that represented the congressional district where I grew up. He had been an incumbent for 19 years and was there collecting a paycheck and wasn't doing anything. And by the way, collecting 2 pensions because he had been a teacher for the state. And then he went to the House of Representatives. And so just felt really something that needed to be done. And I was, enough is enough. I just can't sit here and let this person represent my community. So by the time I got to starting to crunch the numbers in 2014, I was sure that people were not crunching the numbers correctly. Because what I could see was a place in my town, so Lancaster, Pennsylvania, was changing. So I used to joke that the number of coffee shops and yoga studios kept expanding. And where there's coffee or yoga, there's Democrats. And so the city had changed a lot since I had been there in high school. The city was fully Democratic. And I knew that I grew up in a suburb outside of the city. And the people that I grew up with are not for these kinds of policies and this way of thinking. These are people who believe in public schools and believe in public libraries. Maybe they voted for Reagan and all the rest, but they are firmly interested in government providing public services that serve a public good. And so it's with that I'm going to run for this office and see what happens. I think these numbers are wrong. I think no one's looked at them for a long time because they think that they're just in super red territory, which to be fair, they are. But let's look at them again. Let's look at what's changed. And that's how I became a national red to blue candidate in 2016 by convincing everybody at the national level that this race was winnable.
I just felt that was really, really important for our listeners to listen to this because one, I've got a friend who's an MP here as well, and he is a firm believer that if you don't like the way that things are running, everybody should run for office is actually his belief. Don't complain about things things. Yes, voting is one thing, but you can be a part of the change, and not forever. You don't need to be a career politician, but go in and do what needs to be done to be able to be that change. And I just think it's really interesting because, one, your understanding of the system, and two, just your passion, I just think is so important to listen to right now. What are you doing now before we start getting into all the questions that I have about politics and what is happening in the US from your point of view? But what are you doing now?
Maybe we should talk about what I was doing 3 months ago. So 3 months ago, I was a consultant mostly for USAID and USDA clients. So my friend Derek founded this consulting firm, and me and a few other people, 30 other people up until 3 months ago, supported him. And so most of our clients were, again, USAID or USDA, and we did strategic planning, recruitment, and fundraising support, program management support for those clients. And now we're down to 3 people because of what has happened in the government. And so our firm has been annihilated because our clients and the institutions that we work with have been annihilated. And so I am currently helping one Canadian client and one American client that doesn't have any international scope. So that's where we stand right now.
Quite telling of where we're at. So,
which is a nice segue into what we're going to
be talking about. Exactly. So, given the political climate and potential challenges ahead, what do you see as the most urgent threats to U.S. democracy? And do you believe there is a way to mitigate the damage that we're facing?
I'm going to punt and suggest that everybody read the Atlantic article that was just published today, their magazine for April, because they point out that it's probably too late, or it's much later along in the timeline. I am somewhat of a mini expert in dictatorship, so I'm not an Anne Applebaum expert, but I am a person that has worked in them, knows them, has studied them, and understands them quite well. So on the continuum of where we are in our journey to authoritarianism, we're quite far down the path, because the way that all of this works is that people use that expression of boiling a frog, but you turn up the heat on something. So you put somebody into, lukewarm water and it feels good, and then you kind of turn up the heat until the point where the water is boiling and you didn't notice. And that's the situation that we're in. So these things have been happening for a while now. The dismantling of public school education has been happening since I was in high school, at least, by creating public school voucher programs and other ways of doing things, by giving state dollars to private schools, all sorts of things. So we've been dismantling our public education system. We removed civic education for most of our curriculums across the United States ages ago. I mean, even me growing up, I didn't really have a really good education on how a bill becomes a law or something like that. It's very minimal. And so you start with those types of things. And so in that sense, it's been going on forever. And then recognizing that Project 2025 came out last summer, or maybe before that, it described everything that was going to be done, and they're doing every single thing. And these are just classic dictator moves. So they're classic authoritarian regime moves. And what the new magazine, The Atlantic, points out for the April edition is just, and this is from Anne Applebaum, so she's describing how Hungary can be, how people can use Hungary as the example to understand the direction that the United States is likely to go in if we can't pull the brakes on. So that was the second part of your question, which is, how do we put the brakes on this? Well, first, we need everybody out in the streets on April 5th and making sure that we are loud and that people understand that we're upset. It takes lots of folks like me. So I am doing some work right now that's paid, but then I'm also doing a lot of volunteering for what I'm just referring to as the resistance. So people who are working towards making sure that we're taking care of people who have been harmed by the government and need assistance in some way, be that legal, financial, or other, and making sure that those who haven't been harmed yet, but we can guess that they will be, are prepared for what's coming inside the government, and to make sure that all these indivisible groups and others that were created as a result of the 2016 election and Trump won, that those are activated and they're all getting resistance training and understand how to communicate with people and how to get the word out. But that's not enough. So we can see that the media is doing a great job. I mean, I think that the media is doing, maybe great's too strong, but I feel like they're doing a good job of telling the story of what's happening with the US government. The problem is that per usual, and this is why we're in this situation, is that only people like me are listening to that media. And so what is the rest of the country listening to? And does the rest of the country know that we have a problem here? What I don't know yet, although I do keep asking people that are in the middle of the country, what are they hearing? What are they seeing? Where is the understanding from the regular population and understanding also that there's a lot going on. So good signs are that Republicans are showing up at Republican town halls and telling them that they're not okay with how things are going. But in the meantime, the barrage of things continues, and all of them are right out of the dictator, what I call the dictator handbook. I don't think there's an actual dictator handbook, but for 20 years, one of my special skills is to see patterns. And so they all use the same method. And so Trump's just following that dictator handbook. And the shocking part is that Elon is just doing whatever he wants, giving $1 million to people buying their vote. Trump is doing exactly what he did in his company, which is to just do whatever he wants and then see how it plays out in the court of law and hope that he gets lucky. At the end of the day, we're taking away rights from millions of Americans and we're destroying our democracy.
Great segue to the next question that I have, which is around Donald Trump, because as an outsider, I just see this train wreck kind of happening. But it's quite extraordinary how this is how he's always worked. You know, you've been based in New York City. You have obviously been very familiar with the way that he has worked over the years. Can you just help us understand, because you touched on it, but I just think it's really interesting. I didn't know that that's his strategy. What is his strategy, just in how he's run his businesses?
Anybody who's worked for a narcissist or an abuser can tell you that chaos is king. So keep them guessing. And, you know, I listen to my Dirty Pleasures True Crime podcast, and I'm always struck by the similarities between abusive spouses and our president. Again, it's no surprise to me, having worked for domestic violence, sexual assault organization, or if you've ever had an abusive boss or worked in a really toxic work environment. And so it's just this, what I want, when I want it, very chaotic, very unhealthy. I decide, again, not just when I want it, but I'm the decider of what we do and only my preferences matter. So we see all of those things. And then my understanding is that Roy Cohn, his lawyer, taught him to just sue, or do what you want and then have them sue you and then countersue and just keep playing it in the courts. You know, he's just not afraid of the court system and he'll go around it or doesn't care.
And he knows that you can just delay it and who cares and just do whatever you want.
Yeah. And then in the meantime, you don't have to obey the law, so to speak, because if it's been ruled in your favor, then you're doing what you're supposed to do. And only until the other suit comes back through and countersues, and it can be a never ending process. You know, even with the Doge stuff, I mean, people are like, oh, it's so great. You know, some of the USAID money is coming back online. And I'm like, right, but in the meantime, you completely and totally dismantled an institution, and the 30 odd businesses or 100 businesses or however many businesses it is that are in its orbit. So you don't just build those back up tomorrow. You don't just get to hire those people back on. Exactly. And let's be clear, none of this is taking into account the human toll. Yeah. So in terms of, linking it back to the work that you've done, Philippa, in terms of return on humanity, there is zero humanity in any of this. The cruelty is the point. And we are not considering people's feelings or children or hopes or dreams or anything. This is just, oh, wow, good luck to you.
And then obviously we're not even considering the ramifications of what happens when all of that money has been pulled. And that's actually the next question that I have, because obviously on this side of the equation in the US, and then, you've got the businesses, you've got the people's livelihoods, there's just so much there. But, the US has historically held this oversized role in global institutions. But these recent decisions have sort of eroded that influence. What do you see as the long-term consequences of this retreat from the world stage? When we talked about it the other day, I had not thought about it from this point of view, because obviously cutting funding in Uganda for the Ebola crisis, it's obvious what the ramifications will be of that. Likewise, HIV, so many issues that obviously can then very quickly not only impact those regions, but then very quickly, we've already been through a pandemic, can spiral to impact other people. So that sort of feels a little bit obvious and terrifying. But specifically, what is going to be the outcome on the US and the world from the canceling of this U.S. foreign aid?
So let's talk about the impact of the U.S. By pulling out of international institutions, interestingly, we are ceding power. So this is a very interesting concept to me. And also, again, to quote Secretary Madeleine Albright, because that's what I like to do, she would explain foreign policy as a toolbox, right? And you have tools in your toolbox that you want to use at different times. And USAID is what most of us in the industry would refer to as soft power, like a carrot. You use this to earn people's trust and goodwill and things like this. And there's hard power, which is, what we did in Yemen, right? Dropping bombs. And the US has many different tools, but basically Trump is canceling all of the soft tools. So we had Voice of America, which was canceled. We had USAID canceled, USIP canceled. All of these are destroyed, obliterated, gotten rid of. And we're only left with hard power, which is fascinating because, and I think you and I talked about this last time, but that's like saying that I only need a hammer in my toolbox. And every job that I have in my home, I can do with a hammer, which if I said that to you, and I'm no home improvement expert, all I know is that I own my own home and I sometimes hang photos on a wall. And I can tell you that a hammer is not always the tool that you need. In fact, a hammer can often do a lot of damage in a way that you don't want it to if you're not careful, or if your drywall isn't great, which sometimes mine isn't. And so this is very analogous to what's happening in the world. So we've decided that the only thing we care about is having a hammer. We'll only use hard power. But you can see it even in these conversations over Signal about the Jeff Goldberg Atlantic scandal from the other day. And so they only want one tool. It's either you're going to put up or shut up. You're going to do what we say, and we've got a gun to your head, or we're not playing. Like, as in, you're either dying or you're going to do what we say. I mean, it's basically like a holdup. Like, we are now the terrorists in a sense. This is terroristic behavior. I mean, they think of it as tit for tat, right? So they're like, well, we're going to do something for you, and in return, you need to do something for us. But there are plenty of countries from whom, I don't know, that we don't really want that much, or that, maybe we don't see as valuable in that way, or that people find it insulting to be approached in that manner. We're not accounting for any humanness. So I think going back to that humanity piece is always important, because this is a parent that only hits their child. They're never trying to say, if you do this, then maybe I could do this for you, or this is, we're just going to smack you all the time. There's no other solution to our problem other than to hit you. And so maybe in the short run, you scare a lot of people. But in the long run, we just know that both throughout history, throughout parenting, throughout DIY, we know that it doesn't end well when you only have one tool in your toolbox. Totally. We know this.
From the point of view of ceding power, which was something that I found fascinating when we were talking, and like I say, I had not thought about that. And how you explained it was really interesting, just about the US took up a lot of space internationally in a lot of discussions, in a lot of regions, territories, conversations, organizations. Now they've all left. And what is the ramification of that? Just so that we all understand what ceding power means.
So the irony here is that Trump thinks that we're not powerful enough within these organizations. If you had asked anybody in those organizations, you would know that nothing happened without the Americans there. Literally nothing. And sometimes that was monetarily, unless we showed up. And that's what, Trump claims he's mad about. I don't think that's entirely what he's mad about, but sure, if we didn't pay the bills, then that wouldn't get done. But a lot of it was because we were paying the bills, so we felt we had a lot to say about it. But when you leave a space that you once somewhat controlled with money or your voice or your power, or however you want to, depending on the circumstance, however we were wielding our weight and wielding our tools, we've now left the space. And whenever you leave a space, there's a vacuum. And the question is, who's going to fill the vacuum? And the answer is Russia and China. And that has been the case, again, since I was in school in 1995. Like, we're coming up on 30 years of none of this being new. And so 30 years, we've been talking about Russia and China filling that space. And we know for a fact that Russia and China do not care anything about human rights, democracy, or freedom. We know that they will jail people without regard to anything. The Chinese care a bit more about money than the Russians, just because Russia doesn't really have any. But it's really not, in my opinion, who you want among your friends. You want people who have your same values. And so, we used to think that American values were based on democracy and freedom. And now we're saying that we don't want to be friends with any of our fellow democracies. Again, when you're not in those rooms and someone else fills that space. And then guess what happens? Those people will then offer money. China will offer money. They have been for the Africans for 2 decades. The Chinese have been in Africa offering the Africans money to build roads, to build rail, to build whatever. And the African countries say yes. And because they are being offered this money, they feel like they need to do something in return. So they vote with China on things at the UN, right? They side with China. It's how politics and international politics works, right? I don't quite frankly I think politics is politics, but just to say that he's not playing it very well. The only thing here is that you can think that the end game is for him to be in charge of the world, for world domination with Russia, and or that he's a Russian asset and he's just doing whatever Russia asks.
Yeah, and that's obviously the big question mark that I think we're all wanting to understand better. So one thing I do find interesting, just because obviously I'm based in Brazil, we've been through the Lula and Bolsonaro elections. We've had Bolsonaro in power. We managed to avoid him being in power again, and we currently have Lula. But it's really interesting, sort of specifically related to the PT, which is the party for Lula. The question is, how did the US get into this situation? And when I reflect on and it's so complex, but it's almost like the PT party and also the people who support the party. There's an element of, we know better. We are the sort of owners of the truth. We were the enlightened ones. And anyone who doesn't vote for the PT is sort of evil, supports dictatorships, stupid. And I don't know actually if the PT really truly have sort of gone out onto the streets and truly understand why people continue to support actively Bolsonaro. And I would not say that everyone who supports Bolsonaro is some evil person who supports dictatorships. There's so many very nuanced reasons why they actively support Bolsonaro. And you have this polarization, which of course we're all familiar with it. We've got Brexit, we've got, the US, we've got, what's happening in Brazil as well. But I'm just wondering, you had Trump already as a president. We knew what he stood for, but yet he managed to get in again. Do you see parallels with this mentality? Like, it's hard to understand how Trump got in. And okay, we could say that it's algorithms. We could say that it's a lot of brainwashing, but there are still a lot of people on the ground who are very much in support. Are the Democrats just perhaps out of touch?
Possible that the Democrats are partially out of touch. And I'll say something that kind of scared me during the Biden-Harris campaign. I went to a number of rallies, and every time I was really pleased with the messaging, and I'm always concerned because if the messaging is resonating with me, then we have a problem. The messaging shouldn't be for me, it should be for others. I should be like, oh, that's not necessarily the message that I want to hear, but I understand why they have to say those things. But no, I was actually hearing the messages that I wanted to hear. And I may have told President Biden that I thought the messaging was great. So, okay, that's on me. But anyway, I think we can attribute a couple of things. Part of it is the messaging maybe not resonating. And of course, because many people don't know what a fascist is necessarily, or, in terms of even oligarchy. In 1995, I was like, oh, we have an oligarchy. But that's what I was studying. Most people don't even study what I study. So it's not even about a college degree. It's just this stuff is so obscure to a certain extent. I think we can't underestimate the distaste that Americans have for voting for a woman for top level office. I think we can't discount the sort of baby boomer piece still being influential, and most of those baby boomer men in particular just being that Trump is speaking their language. I think that the media still plays a really big role. So I don't want to discount it, because someone came out with a new survey this morning that said 3/4 of the podcasts and stuff that are out there right now are 3/4 of them are Republican leaning. So even if you're not watching Fox News, if you're listening to Joe Rogan or whoever, Ben Shapiro, it's an earworm, and those people are listening to that. And then I would say, I'm not putting it down to just union men, younger union men, but I do think that there could potentially be an issue around what messages are younger men receiving. Again, there was a piece yesterday that was sort of countering that, but so I don't have the data on that, but it's a part that I'm curious about, because you just see this really distinct difference between educated women and non-educated men.
The thing that's scary is, I think I heard, and I could be wrong, but is it true that 1/3 of eligible voters didn't cast a ballot in the last election?
Correct. So, right. So we're actually only living out the mandate of a third of the population.
Yeah.
And so I think the other thing that's important about that sort of, one of my campaign managers always used to tell me, Christina, 25% of the population is just a bit wacko. You have to understand that 22 to 25% is never an accurate understanding of what's happening. Those folks are just sort of off on another space. About 75%. And what we've seen is that percent. So that was in 2015 when he told me that, right? So I think what we've seen is that percentage like inched up a little bit, but still you have folks that they want a more, Democrats are seen as not as powerful. So they want somebody who's powerful and going to take charge. And then what you see here between the Democrats and the Republicans, and I'm not the first person to say this, Nancy Pelosi has also said it, but it's like a battered woman versus male situation. Like it just feels so gendered how the parties are even treated. The Democrats are just treated like some woman that's disposable and can never do anything right, can't get it together. You know, I should feel like that. I'm happy to blame the Democrats. Like I'm a Democrat, but I'm happy to blame them and be like, your messaging can be better. But also, it's never good enough. It's never enough. Nothing they're ever doing is enough. Like at what point does it become obvious that you have just decided that the Republican is the patriarchy party, and because we're still so entrenched in the patriarchy?
As you know, I mentioned this to you, but I sort of struck up a conversation with this very articulate, very political individual on Instagram, which is not something that you usually do, but I needed to understand because they claim to be very human and, you know, humanity focused, but then they were very, very vocal about not voting for the Democrats or for the Republicans. So they are in this category of people that didn't vote. And they were very, very vocal about, it was basically about choosing between two war criminals by pretending it's democracy. And, you know, they talked about the dangers of dictatorship, but at the same time, the Democratic Party, it's as if they haven't been sustaining brutal regimes, as if they aren't directly responsible for the very structures of power that Trump is now using. And they go on to say how just voting for the Democrats does not stop this cycle, and actually it just feeds it. And they actually said that the word for this is the ratchet effect, and how they just said that there's a whole group of people that just need to stop all of this. And they go on to explain sort of what's going on. But again, back to the Democratic Party hasn't been completely innocent in a lot of their international policies and responses. And of course, we've got the issues with Israel, etc. And I just, you know, it's so hard because you're looking at how people are just feeling so disenfranchised and just feeling just they have no power, and they're just seeing all of this horrible policies and wars just unfolding, but yet they don't vote knowing that there's a dictatorship in the wings. And now that, is this better? I don't know. Do you know what I mean? And it's just, I can see how all of this happens, but at the same time, it just is bonkers to me that people also then allow this to happen. But I don't know. There's no easier answer to this, of course, but I just wanted to put it out there and see what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's an important question to ask. So the folks in power now think that things are so flawed that they have to literally dismantle it. And you may remember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a congresswoman from the Bronx, who started the phrase defund the police. And people had a problem with that because, well, surely we can not throw the baby out with the bathwater or whatever. And she was like, no, we just need to dismantle the whole system. And so there seems to be consensus on the far left and the far right that we just need to dismantle everything. I'm more of a, hey, let's be strategic and not throw everything out together person. Yeah. But I do see if that person's strategy is to take 100-year view and to say that we have to go to this bad place before we can go to a better place, then okay, maybe. It's just that none of us are going to be living the lives we thought. We're all going to be living quite a different life. And so fine enough, we'll adjust. We're humans. We're good at eventually adjusting, maybe not at first, but eventually. And so if we view it in that way, then we know that there's going to be a fight for the next 20 to 30 years minimum, and that we will get to the other side, and what the other side looks like, we hopefully can build something better. But in the meantime, a lot of people might die. A lot of people are probably going to die and be imprisoned and go without and have a very different lifestyle to the one that the baby boomers had and that Gen Xers grew up in and that millennials had to a certain degree. And yeah.
It kind of brings us back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is the importance of being political, and rather than just simply not voting and not doing anything. I mean, of course, this could be polemic, just me saying this, but is just not doing anything and just, you know, having a loud voice and saying, just don't vote for anyone and taking that backseat. Is that the answer? I mean, I don't know if it is.
I mean, I don't think so at all. I think you need to get your hands dirty no matter what, and you've got to figure out a way. And so you can build community, you can do lots of other things that help build democracy without being overtly political. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done. And I can say that, that is one small silver lining to all of this mess, is that it's bringing people together in a way that is helpful and is building a resistance of people. The question is, will that be enough? Will people be able to continue to do it? It's exhausting work. And also life carries on, right? You still have weddings and anniversaries and, and people still die and things still happen. Life still keeps happening. And so the question is, how do you balance fighting for what's right and for the life that you want so that we can revive the social contract? Because that's essentially what's happened here. The social contract is dead.
We're talking so much about Trump. I don't believe that this is even about Trump. He's a puppet, I feel, in all of this. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing, all of this sort of Silicon Valley power that's behind, actually, I think, all of this. What are your thoughts on this unchecked power? They got Vance in to be the vice president. Trump, I just think is the puppet. And you've got these puppet masters who are from big tech, who, the dark enlightenment, and just really curious to know what concerns you most about all of this.
Yeah, I mean, again, not just unchecked power, but they're weighing into things. They don't have security clearances. They don't have the way that government normally works gone out the window. The likes of Elon Musk and Peter Thiel have been accused of a variety of things and have somehow avoided consequences for them. So talk about the courts just working only for white guys and people getting away with everything. This is a lack of accountability in a system that continues to allow that for certain groups of people on the regular. And we've seen it. I mean, Peter Thiel's been, again, accused of lots of horrific things for more than 10 years. And he's still walking the streets like a regular person. So I think that it's just the way, what one podcaster calls the good old boys. And they're the new good old boys, but they're still it's still the same idea. Get a pass for everything. If you have enough money to get your way through court, then you'll hire the right lawyers to get you through and everything will be fine. And there's no consequence. There's no consequences to actions. And that is, again, the most ironic part of it all, because everything that they say, I mean, it's kind of like Peter Higgs said the other day, there were no war plans. They literally, there's a psychological term for that. When you say the exact thing that you've done, do you know what I mean? But you say the opposite of it and you're putting it out there. Like, not just lying, but if you're literally saying the thing that was done, that you did, but you're saying you didn't do it. And we all know that you did it. And once again, it's not all guys, right? So my husband certainly isn't like this. There's this level of accountability that women are held to. The standard that we must meet, and people of color, is even higher than that, which white women must meet. And so it's like mind-boggling to all of us because, well, I'm sure people of color are just, white ladies, we've been here this whole time. Like, this keeps happening. Where have you been? And it's not that I don't know it's happening. Of course I know it's happening. I watch it happen all the time. I've had a problem with it for ages, but how do you stop it? And now they're in charge. I don't know. And there's a lot of people, including judges, who are going to need to speak out, and lawyers. This idea that Paul Weiss guy just did whatever Trump said and, bowed to him. No, we're going to need you to find your backbone, because if not, then we're in for a really horrible dictatorship for at least 30 years.
Yeah. Well, this was never going to be the happy rainbow flower podcast. And it is what it is. But people do feel really powerless right now in the face of such large scale political shifts. What can you say to those people who just feel their efforts, whether voting, activism, or community engagement, just don't make a difference? What can people do to feel like they can help in some way?
It does make a difference. First of all, it makes a difference. All of those things that you just said make a difference. I saw a video on Instagram the other day. I'm not on TikTok. And this woman was like, part of building community is showing up to things that you commit to. And so if you sign up for something, show up. If you said you're going to be at somebody's birthday party, unless something really terrible is happening, like you're very sick or whatever, go, show up. It takes effort to build community. And if you want a village to be there for you, you have to be there for your village. And showing up in those small ways makes a difference. And I thought that was really meaningful. So not just at a political level, the showing up. And we are all tired. We are all exhausted, all of the things. So find shortcuts however you can. If you committed to going to the birthday party, but you don't have time to get a gift, okay, just bring it next time or whatever, but still show up. Go to a knitting circle. You know what? In other countries, what we used to do for civic activism, we would find whatever that country's equivalent was to a knitting circle or a book club or whatever, and we would then train those people on whatever it was that we were training. So whether that was health or civic resistance or whatever, because that was a community of people who came together on a regular basis, who trusted each other, who believed in each other, and maybe they came for the books or the knitting, but it didn't matter. Even that matters. Connection with other humans is what people want right now. Yeah. It is what can help make a difference. And if you have time in addition to that, please take a civic resistance training. It's non-violent civic resistance. We are not suggesting that anybody take up arms. We are talking about non-violent civic resistance in the way of Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King. And obviously go out and vote, get involved in a partisan way if you want to, get involved in a non-partisan way, find your indivisible group, whatever. You can take on small things and one thing or two things and set your goals once a week, whatever you can do, whatever you can manage. Also continue to talk to your children about what it really means to live in a free and fair society, and make sure that you are helping them to see examples of that in their everyday life that we don't want to go away.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. That's so inspirational and has actually filled my heart with a bit of hope. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to tell our listeners?
We are the answer, Philippa. No one is coming to save us. We are the answer to our own problems. And we must work really hard to make sure that this man and his cronies don't take over what was once a aspiring, free and fair democracy, and that we can do it. We truly can. It's not too late yet, but we have to work really hard to make sure, and make sure that our neighbors know, and make sure our neighbors' neighbors know, and that it's all about community.
Christina, thank you for your time. I know that you're in the UK and doing your thing there, so thanks for fitting me in. And I'm so grateful to you and all the work that you've done over so many years. Now you're needed on the home front.
I was hoping this day wouldn't come, but it did. So I'm happy to use my skills where they're needed, just like it was in my own country. Yay!
Yeah.
But no, thank you so much, Philippa, for this conversation. And as always, thank you for the work that you do and the amazing support that you give to folks and helping us keep humanity in focus.
Thanks, Christina. Until the next time.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Hey everyone, this is Philippa again. I hope you enjoyed listening. Now this is your chance to get involved with TIE. If you're looking to create better leaders, better companies, and a better world, that's just what we do by helping leaders tap into their greatest asset, their humanity. We have a number of corporate programs that impact a range of people, from individuals at a company to 500 people around a business. Or check out my book, Return on Humanity. Leadership lessons from all corners of the world. You'll find the answers to how business can truly become a positive force while remaining at the forefront of competition. You can find all the information you need on all of this at tieleadership.com. Get in touch and I can explain more. A huge thanks to Berna Vieira for co-producing this with me and for creating the music. I hope we'll meet up again soon.